Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees and here are today's top stories. The Queen's husband, Prince Philip, dies at the age of 99. A poll shows a majority of Britons still consider the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine to be safe. And new guidelines for international travel say that all travellers need to undergo a PCR test. Buckingham Palace confirmed today that Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, has died at the age of 99.
In a statement, the palace said His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle. Further announcements will be made in due course. The royal family join with people around the world in mourning his loss. In recent years, there had been signs that his health was failing. In February, he was admitted to hospital and stayed there for 4 weeks. Prince Philip's death, just 2 months before his 100th birthday, didn't come as a surprise, but has triggered an outpouring of tributes from within Britain and beyond. In Downing Street, Prime Minister Boris Johnson paid his tribute to the Duke for his decades of public service.
We remember the Duke for all of this, and above all, for his steadfast support for Her Majesty the Queen. Not just as her consort, by her side every day of her reign, but as her husband, her strength and stay of more than 70 years.
Flags at Buckingham Palace and at government buildings across Britain have been lowered to half-mast.
So we mourn today with Her Majesty the Queen. We offer our condolences to her and to all her family. And we give thanks as a nation and a kingdom for the extraordinary life and work of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
Labour leader Keir Starmer also paid tribute.
Well, the UK has lost an extraordinary public servant in Prince Philip. He dedicated his life to our country. And above all, I think he'll be remembered for his support and devotion to the Queen. And all of our thoughts are with the Queen, the royal family and the British public as they come together to mourn this huge loss.
Born as a Greek prince, Philip spent much of his youth in Britain. During the Second World War, he serviced as a captain in the Royal Navy. He married then Prince Elizabeth in 1947. Less than 5 years later, King George VI died and Elizabeth became Queen, her coronation taking place in 1953, and Philip became the monarch's prince consort. During the seismic changes that took place in post-war years, he was the one key figures the Queen could turn to and trust.
A poll shows that a majority of Britons trust the AstraZeneca vaccine despite blood clot concerns. According to a YouGov poll commissioned by The Times, 41% of people surveyed considered the vaccine very safe. That's a drop of 6 percentage points since mid-March. Another 34% considered it somewhat safe. For one of its rivals, the Pfizer vaccine, 51% of those polled considered it very safe, and 27% considered it somewhat safe. The survey was done between this Wednesday and Thursday. The Transport Department announces new guidelines for getting international travel back in our lives. A new traffic light system for countries will determine testing requirements for travellers. The travel industry has criticised the cost of these tests. NTD's Neil Woodrow has the details.
A new report by the government's Global Travel Task Force shows how international travel could resume from May 17th at the earliest, but there'll be added costs for all travellers. In the guidelines, passengers will no longer be required to prove they have a valid reason to leave the country, and a new traffic light system will categorise countries based on risk. Travellers returning from a green country don't need to undergo quarantine anymore. The government says the risk posed by variants remains significant, so testing for all travellers remains in place. Each traveller will be required to pay for a PCR test on return to the UK, costing between £100 and £140 £200 each. The travel industry has criticised the cost of these tests. They are desperate for a busy summer. Airlines UK, an industry body which represents British Airways, EasyJet and others, says this does not represent a reopening of travel as promised by ministers. It is a further setback for an industry on its knees. And a spokesperson for Birmingham Airport told me, "We are concerned that the current testing proposal will make travel unaffordable for many." Confirmation of whether international travel can resume from May 17th is still to come. Some are still cautious about booking a trip abroad. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
A European court rules that mandatory vaccinations for children in the Czech Republic don't violate the European Convention on Human Rights. The European Court of Human Rights ruled such a policy can be necessary in a democratic society. NTD's Lily Joel has more on this.
The European Court of Human Rights on Thursday accepts the Czech Republic's position on mandatory vaccinations for children. The landmark ruling could impact a debate on vaccinating children against COVID-19. In the Czech Republic, unless exempt, it's mandatory for children to receive 2 vaccines. Several parents filed complaints against the policy, some dating back to 2003. In its ruling, the court says it recognized that compulsory vaccination does concern the right to respect for private life. But it adds, the Czech policy pursued the legitimate aims of protecting health as well as the right of others, and is in the best interest of children. The court says mandatory vaccinations for children can be necessary in a democratic society.
That there has been no violation of Article 8 of the Convention, and finds that accordingly, the government's objection of non-exhaustion of domestic remedies in relation to the Article 8 complaints of the applicants Brožič and Dubsky has become moot, and as such calls for no examination.
One parent was fined for refusing to vaccinate his children. The court says the punishment for violating the rules is proportionate. A lawyer who represented the parents said the verdict is disappointing as the uncritical vaccination ideology prevailed. The UK is still subject to the European Convention on Human Rights. Lily Zhou, NTD News.
Next Monday, Debenhams will reopen its remaining stores for a closing down sale. The 243-year-old retail chain will clear stock in 97 stores. Then, from the 2nd of May, all stores in England and Wales will start to close for good. The company's 15 Scottish stores and its flagship shop in Oxford Street will not reopen. Online retailer Boohoo acquired Debenhams' brand name in a £55 million deal. The company plans to relaunch Debenhams' online shop by the end of May. Boohoo says it's a top 10 retail website in the UK by traffic. A new study reveals in the mental health crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, children and young people are worst affected.
According to the analysis by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, nearly 400,000 children and 2.2 million adults sought help for mental health problems during the pandemic. Data from across the health and social care systems in England show referrals to mental health services for under 18s went up by nearly 30% on the year before. Over 370,000 under 18s were referred to mental health services between April and December last year. Treatment sessions in that time period went up too. Nearly 3.6 million treatment sessions were given to under 18s, up by 20%. And more children and young people needed urgent or emergency crisis care, over 18,000 more, an increase again of nearly 20% on 2019. The Royal College of Psychiatrists is calling for the additional £500 million in the government's mental health recovery plan to urgently reach the front line. The chair of the Child and Adolescent Faculty at the college, Dr. Bernardka Dubica, says school closures, disrupted friendships, and the uncertainty caused by the pandemic are having a devastating effect on under 18s. The study also found that the crisis is affecting adults too. Over 1 million more treatment sessions were given to adults between April and December last year. That's an increase of 8% on 2019.
Multi-millionaire hotelier 83-year-old Sir Richard Sutton was stabbed to death at his home near Gillingham, Dorset. Dorset police say he was pronounced dead at the scene. His wife, in her 60s, was airlifted to a hospital in Bristol and is in a critical condition. Sutton was one of the richest in the country, owning luxury hotels such as the Sheraton Grand London Park Lane and the Athenaeum Hotel in Mayfair. And in other news, Britain's best-known sporting bodies have backed the idea of COVID passports. However, they say the system shouldn't be discriminatory.
Britain's major sporting bodies have backed the government's plan to test vaccine passports, calling it a credible way to have their venues full of fans.
We want to be going ahead in the next few weeks with some test events, some pilot events, which you can see in the roadmap that we've laid out, and big events like getting 20,000 people into Wembley on May the 15th.
The trials will include tracking if people had the vaccine, testing negative, or had natural immunity. A letter supporting the scheme, addressed to the Prime Minister and cross-party leaders, was signed by major sports groups including the Premier League, the Lawn Tennis Association and the England and Wales Cricket Board. The major sporting bodies are facing a financial crisis since the pandemic restrictions. They've thrown their support behind the certification system, saying they could see the benefits of how it could get fans back to their sports as quickly as possible. They added there are many issues to address, like how the technology would work and its ease of use. They wrote, the final approach must not be discriminatory, should protect privacy and have clear exit criteria. We also reiterate that certification should not be a requirement for any form of participation in grassroots sports around the country. With mass sporting events planned, there are warnings for people to watch out for phishing emails, with fraudsters most likely finding ways to sell fake certificates and get people's personal data.
A targeted spear phishing email around an event obviously has a much higher chance of success, even for people who are tech savvy. Sports matches, click here now if you want to go to the FA Cup final. There is the opportunity, because you're a Liverpool supporter, that you could have the chance to get a ticket. Then of course people will probably go forward with that kind of thing.
Michael Gove is reviewing the implications of a domestic vaccine passport system. The government faces strong opposition to the idea from MPs. Reporting by Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Up next, police deployed water cannons in another night of rioting in Northern Ireland. That and more when we return.